Friday. I'm glad that we're starting to get a little stability after a week of madness, but doing great. Thank God it's Friday.
Talk about a week of madness. That's an understatement for your main markets, the energy markets. The past 10 trading days have been wild. I mean, we've seen oil drop
Yeah.
over the last 30 days from 77 down to 55. And we saw a big move this week from about the 60-50 level down to $55. And then natural gas, natural gas moved from, I believe, over the past, 8 or so trading days, 330 up to almost $5. And yesterday we were back below $4, and we're back up today. So what's the talk in energy land? There's a lot of, it's not a huge universe, and so there's a lot of people that talk. What's the talk in terms of what's caused these moves?
I think, a lot of people in energy land have been stunned. I mean, we go back to the oil move and the natural gas move. Two different reasons, really. I think that the run on the oil market really started with President Trump, and when he basically told everybody, "Hey, we're going to get Iranian oil exports down to zero." He told all the different oil producers, "You better raise production. I'm going to be very upset. You're going to cause a problem in the global economy." And he hoodwinked all these producers. I say hoodwinked. I wrote a report a week ago, and got them to raise production. Then he pulled the plug and said, "Hey, we're granting waivers to everybody on Iranian oil," and that created the beginning of a sell-off. Okay, so and the timing was perfect because he did this right as the refiners in the U.S. were in maintenance. He was at the same time releasing millions of barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, giving a perception that U.S. supplies were actually higher than they probably really were based on supply and demand, and based on production. And so, he engineered this price spike, or price collapse, basically by changing the rules of the game in the middle of the day. Natural gas, on the other hand, this is a market that I think is like going through a minefield, and it's going to continue to see maybe record volatility like we've seen, anything like we've seen in a long time. We saw, for example, in the natural gas, the weather. I mean, the problem with natural gas is storage. Storage is at the lowest level it's been since 2005. And the demand for natural gas in the United States and with exports is higher than it's ever been. So this isn't 2005 anymore when it comes to the demand side. The reason why a lot of people were bearish is because a lot of people thought that supplies in storage really didn't matter because the U.S. was becoming such a prolific natural gas producer. We're the biggest natural gas producer in the world. So why would we need supplies? Because all we have to do is, open up a shale field and we're going to bring on all this production, and, the inventories are going to come. It's just a matter of time. As soon as we get some cool weather, and get into fall, the production numbers are just going to surge and the supplies are going to come up. But we never had a fall. We never had cooler temperatures, right? It never happened. And so we were running our air conditioners through October, and now we've flipped on the heaters, and we had record cold temperatures in the country. I think Houston, Texas, I think they had snow for the earliest time in history. You have freeze-offs in natural gas, and that's a thing that usually doesn't happen until December. Up in Houston, that's when the natural gas gets clogged up because the liquids in the natural gas freeze up. So the wells don't produce. So you end up starting to produce less. And then you have this situation. I think it was exasperated because a lot of the commodity funds were the wrong way. A lot of option writers, a lot of short sellers looking at the situation saying, "Hey, we got plenty of production." And they got caught. And I think it exasperated the moves. And I don't think the moves are over yet, Mike. I think you're going to see move up and down, continue to, when you get a big rally, buy puts. When you get a big break, buy calls. And I think that's the safest way to play this market.
So it sounds like you're saying step one was the administration kind of really being unhappy with oil prices above 70, getting vocal and opening the reserves. Step two was the colder weather that we saw, which is, completely random there. And step three is just all of the combination of both those and the speed of the move catching markets off guard, and a lot of people with big positions having to adjust and possibly even getting margin calls and forced out of the positions, kind of creating the explosive moves.
Yes, a big part of it, and and demand too. And the thing that I'm concerned about is that the market's going to get too complacent now that prices have fallen down. About production. We keep talking about record U.S. production. There's a lag time for U.S. shale producers and U.S. producers to bring oil onto the market. So, for example, we just, the market saw pressure because the U.S. shale producers were, producing a record amount of oil as well. Even though the supplies in the U.S. didn't build up that much without the U.S. production, there's just perception by the traders and by the marketplace that, oh my gosh, the shale guys are just going to keep producing more oil. But you got to remember, when they added this oil production, it was 6 weeks ago. Look at where the price of oil was 6 weeks ago compared to where it is now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's $20 difference. So sure, yeah, those producers are like, oh, $70 oil, man, let's open it up, man. Let's do it. We've got new pipelines opening up. Let's bring it on. And now, 6 weeks later, they're going to be saying, ooh, maybe we overdid it a bit. Maybe we got to pull back a little bit. Now, obviously, some of these producers were hedged, but it doesn't really bode well for the straight line up of production that a lot of people are going to be counting on.
All right, so here's a question for you, Phil. You've been in the industry for a very long time. You've seen tons of different moves. You've seen amazing moves of all different kinds. And, look, this week has been ranks up there with some of the larger moves we've seen in the energy market, where we've had crude drop from 62 down to 55 in about 2 days. And we had nat gas, go limit up and limit down basically in 2 days. Take us through the dynamics a little bit of when a fund or a bank or a broker is overexposed and caught in a position.
Mm-hmm.
What's the process of happening that kind of exacerbates these moves because they are forced to do something? Can you take us through the dynamic of that?
I think what happened, I'll give you a perfect example on natural gas the other day. Remember I was telling you the way to play it was to be long puts and calls on natural gas, right? And the problem that we had is that when the market spiked up and everybody realized there was a panic, we went from volatility in the natural gas that was very low to volatility that exploded. And so if you're the writer of these calls and puts, okay, if you're a big fund and you sold a lot of these options and you want to get out of these things, because the market's going the wrong way and there's panic buying, people are afraid to get out. And even on the put side where you think you might have some protection, there was a time where the bids and offers on both the puts and the calls were higher on the day. So the funds are getting hit on both sides. Now, because the volatility was low and the margins, probably weren't prepared. I think what's the margin on natural gas today? I think
it's $2,800, and I think they moved it up from. Yeah. I think it was $2,200, and they moved it up to about $3,000.
To 28, to 20. Yeah. And and it went from that overnight because, the volatility previously, and that's how they set the margins, were so low because the market had a made this outside a deviation move for a long time. So even your best computer models might not see this coming. And even if you think you have plenty of room, even if you increase the margin 2 or 3 times, you have a $2,200 margin, you moved almost 8,000 in a day. That's 3 times the normal standard move in a day. and there was no reason to believe or know that it was going to get even worse. You know what I'm saying? So the you look at the liquidity based on the implied numbers on the options, and the clearing members are saying, hey guys, you've got to get out of this stuff. Okay. So now you've got a thin market because of the volatility's up, and you're being forced to get out because you're running out of money. And so the bids and offers get even further. So then, when everybody's when you have to buy, or when you have to buy back options when everybody else is trying to buy them, and nobody wants to sell them, you get into a real big problem. It's like an auction. It's kind of like a Larry Benedict trading card. Everybody wants it, right? And so everybody's bidding it up, and nobody wants to sell it. You only got one, and that's the thing. And so the market gets overextended. So then, the guys on the other side of the trade, they get a little bit greedy, and they can squeeze these guys, right? It's like, hey, you got 5,000 people coming at you, say, I want to buy it here. And you're going to say, oh, really? Okay. You're going to sit back. And so the offers are going to go a lot higher. So it becomes a frenzy, really, and even the people that may want to take the other side of your trade, they're afraid to get out at the wrong price as well. So the liquidity dries up because both the buyers and sellers become fearful, and then the panic ensues, and that's why you overextend these moves by a much larger amount.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And, it sounds like we're hearing similar things that you've been saying, that, the moves have been exacerbated by a lot of funds that are forced buying, forced selling. One day I heard forced selling of crude oil, big fund. And that was a lot of part of the move from, I think, 58 down to about that 55 level, right near expiration. I think it was Wednesday. And then same thing with nat gas. When we started really getting above, I think, about the 380, 390 level, moving us well past 450 the following day. In nat gas, when we were watching that, I mean, it was moving 10, 15 cents almost in a tick, basically.
Yeah, and it makes it very difficult for the average trader too, because first of all, there's opportunity. There's no doubt about it. There's people that are not position traders in this stuff, and they're looking at this stuff, and it's like feast time, baby. Look at this thing. It's free falling. And I talked to a lot of traders who are just selling it and day trading it, and they had a really good week. The position traders, obviously, who are trying to ride out the madness, and look at, what should be happening based on the fundamentals, price wise, get caught up, of course, in this margin selling, and it was like I was telling you last week, I can argue all day long that the sell off was overdone, because of this situation, but it doesn't matter. It becomes like that. And what's crazy about these crazy moves is that big sell-offs like that always have ramifications longer term. And people don't realize that. They look at it, oh God, it's all over. It's one day. The thing is that the you bet. The thing is that the thing is that it's going to have ramifications for times to come. For example, you're going to see the margins spiked up on natural gas, so the smaller guys can't take advantage maybe of this unless they're doing options. You're going to see producers who also got beat up, if they weren't hedged correctly, and they're going to be looking at this. You had banks that wrote hedges for a lot of these traders. That also had ramifications. They're going to have to roll these hedges over to meet margin calls themselves. So, now you get all these moving pieces. And, I remember back in, 2000, 7 into 8, when we were going into the financial crisis, and I had been bullish for years. But then, when the market started going up after the Fed started cutting interest rates, I was like, oh wait, this is getting way overdone. And then, people would say, oh no, we got peak oil, it's going to go up and go up. And I go, listen, you cannot be in business and have prices spike like this and not have it affect you? If you're an airline, you're going to have a problem. If prices go up, the price of oil is going up $10 a week, you're not going to be able to handle that. And sure enough, what do we see? We started to see bankruptcies in airlines and corporations because they couldn't afford the crude costs. So, and even a move like this, which I guess compared to 2008 isn't quite as bad, it's going to have ramifications. Producers are going to have to adjust. Hedgers of oil, they're looking at this as a great opportunity. We heard on the break that there were a lot of airlines, trucking companies, you name it, that thought this was a gift from Donald Trump. Thank you, Donald Trump. Here, lower oil prices and locking them in. And I think if you looked at the back end of the curve, it held up a lot better than the front end of the curve, which was really being driven by the hedge funds. So you had this situation where the back end of the curve was up, the front end was down. But of course, that's another spread that people were the wrong way on as well. So just so many moving parts when you get a move like that. Listen, people ask me, are high oil prices bad for the economy or good for the economy? And the answer is it depends on what's driving them higher. If people
Right.
say, if it's being driven by economic growth and the economy is growing, that's a good thing. And people, I don't care if I'm paying, another, 50 cents a gallon for gasoline, if unemployment's at a historic low, I don't like it, but I mean, it's the cost of doing business. But if you start going up, because hedge funds are blowing up or because, there's a war or somewhere, that's when it hurts because businesses can't adjust. They can adjust to, hey, I got more business, I got to spend a little bit more money, I can adjust to that. But, I can't go up like, hey, my business is the same as it was before, but all of a sudden we got a $10 price spike because Donald Trump tweeted something.
Well, you make great points on, what you were saying before. Banks are affected by this. Producers are affected by it. Funds are affected by it. Traders are affected by it, especially those that kind of look at business decisions on fundamentals. Because when you get moves like this, fundamentals are thrown out the door. And it goes back to the old trading saying that we've talked about on the site many times of the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent.
Absolutely.
And so, that's part of the force. You could look at, when natural gas got up to 480, 490, say, hey, this thing should be closer to 380. I'm going to sell it. But, if you would have done that when it's at 410, what are you doing when it's at 480? Because you're going to have a margin call. They just raise the margins and you can't physically cannot even hold the position. So now all of a sudden you've lost money, even though, at one point yesterday, the market was back below that level. And so, it goes to banks, like you said, that might have had hedges, producers, similar sort of thing, and funds. And so that's part of the volatility, and that's part of the what makes the market.
It is, and it's like I say, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times when you get this kind of volatility, and it depends on whether you're bullish or bearish, or you could be bullish and bearish and still have made money on this volatility, just as long as you adjust it at the right time in the right place. And I know that one of the things from traders, because listen, I've been through the best of times and the worst of times when it comes to trading. I think any trader that's been around for a long time has had their best of times and worst of times. But the one thing I want to tell people is that when you do get, caught in a move like this, it isn't necessarily, a lot of people say, I did something wrong, or I did something stupid, or I misread the fundamentals. No, there are real events that happen that, that you just can't predict. And then these events can, set off a house of cards that just get out of control, and it's like I was saying, I mean, there's strategies that you could have done for the last 10 years, that were making money every month. And then all of a sudden something happens like this and they stop, and you can give back everything you made in 10 years in one day, and I think that's why you see a lot of this, talk of hedge funds blowing up and everything else.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, Phil, I appreciate you giving that insight. You've been trading for a long time. You've seen a number of different moves like this. They happen every so often, whether not necessarily every year, every other year, but, you get these sort of moves every once in a while. And, it's important to kind of know the different players there. And it's also important to know that, like we were just saying, the market can continue moving irrationally for a lot longer than people think. And at the same time, I think we still have a long way to go. These, the degree of the moves that we've seen in the past few days, it doesn't just end. So we're going to continue to see pretty high volatility, I think, especially in these energy markets. It seems like everybody, yourself included, is saying we got to really pay attention to this colder winter, see how that continues to pan out. Also see what happens in the Middle East. But, there's still, we're not definitely, there's a lot more move to come.
Well, it's just like they tell you in Disneyland, Mike, buckle up and keep your hands and feet in the tram at all times, because it's going to be a wild ride for sure.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks for the help this week. We'll talk to you next week. Keep us up to date if you hear anything. All right. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.